Awakening is becoming less and less and less until I disappear. Self-reactivity is hindering awakening. Self-reactivity is causing suffering, unnecessary suffering. It's not so easy to just stop reacting. That's actually very difficult because it's a habitual pattern. You have to get to the cause of reactivity before you can stop the reactivity. You have to eliminate the cause of reactivity. What is the cause of reactivity? What is the cause of self-reactivity? There's a clue there. Duh. The cause of self-reactivity is self. Just get rid of the notion of self. Just step into a realization of no self. And guess what stops? No self, no self-reactivity. No self-reactivity, no suffering. Isn't that fascinating? Isn't that something to play with? Isn't that something to experiment with? And see what happens as the self gets, we're born with a very dense sense of self that continues to solidify. The terrible twos and threes, man, it's really solid. And then if you continue the path of spiritual growth and development, it either gets more solid or it begins to loosen up eventually. It's called suffering. Have you suffered enough yet for you to loosen up on your rigid beliefs and values that are strangling you? Some yes, some no. You can't make me. Some are stubborn, some learn from their suffering. We're all over the board, each different, and yet the same. Now, awakening is becoming less and less and less of self. Self begins to diminish and loosen up. We move from gross density of things to more loose, smoky nature of flowing energy until we move into the empty air and the smoke begins to dissipate in the empty sky. The density of self diminishes until it becomes so amorphous that we are almost selfless. And this very thin sliver of self that has traditionally been called the witness finally goes away. And suddenly there's unity with emptiness. A dark night of the senses is a loosening up of the concreteness of our gross mind. When the gross mind becomes less concrete, more amorphous, more space between the dots, we move into the higher self. The higher self that sees auras and sees energies and sees the flowing nature of stuckness and how to eliminate the stuckness by allowing the energy to flow when it gets dammed up, like Chinese medicine. And then finally moving into the less dense sense of self, going through a dark night of the soul where we let go of all the things that we love and all the things that we hate, and the places our energy gets stuck when we grab onto things we love and push away things we hate. The three poisons: greed, anger, hatred, and ignorance or delusion diminish, and we become more selfless, no self, until finally we go through a dark night of the self and we let go of that last sliver of self we call witnessing mind. No mind. This is just a story. Please don't believe it. Don't grab onto it so tightly you believe it and develop a cult about it. It'll create great suffering. It'll create a cult of us against them. But take it to heart. Experiment with it. Perhaps even make it a path that you walk down and practice. Practice becoming selfless and improving your character until the growing up and the waking up unite, unify in one heart. Separate and unify. At the time of the Buddha, it was a very different time. It was a very different culture with different values and beliefs and a different evolutionary state of consciousness. Awakening in this 21st century, in this complex culture, is very different and requires different practices and tools, and separating, having tools to become a better person, and then having tools to awaken, and having the wisdom to know the difference, or having a teacher that has the wisdom to know what you need to meet you where you are and lead you down the path to unify these two truths in your heart mind. So simple. Just stop self reactivity. So, who is responsible for self reactivity? There's a yes. Yes, you are. I am too. We all are. Accept responsibility. Don't blame somebody else for your lack of ability to accept responsibility. Take responsibility for your own awakening, for your own waking up and your own growing up and your own cleaning up, so that you can show up as a whole, healthy, complete, awake, and compassionate human being. So simple and so difficult. And if you try to end suffering by ending suffering, it's almost impossible. But if you go to the root, the cause of suffering, suffering is the effect. Go to the cause, which is self. Eliminate the self reactivity. Another name for self reactivity, which might be useful to you, is selfing. I'm reinforcing this sense of self. I'm liking these things and disliking those. I'm grabbing on to my delusions, my thoughts, and my feelings, my likes and dislikes. Just get rid of the notion of self and just stop selfing, reinforcing this sense of self. So simple. Every time this sense of self arises, like a snake poking its head out of the hole, cut it off. Cut off the head of the snake until that process becomes automatic. So simple, so difficult to stay present enough, to cultivate enough discipline to stay on track. Just get rid of selfing and suffering will end. This is a practice. This is a practice path until it becomes so automatic that you automatically, the moment the snake's head pops up, you cut it off automatically without thinking. Automaticity. This is what Dan Brown is teaching. This is what Integral Zen is teaching. Assisting you. Assisting you. We can't do it for you. You must take responsibility and learn to do it yourself until it becomes a habit, automatic. No selfing is awakening. Ending the habit of selfing is synonymous with awakening. Becoming a better person is learning to be compassionate and kind with real love, selfless love that has no agenda, that expects nothing in return. So simple and yet so difficult. We need teachers, we need sanghas, and we need teachings. And these need to evolve with the complexity of our personalities and our cultures. And who knows, in another 500 years, or 600 years, or 2,000 years, we may have a fourth turning of Buddhism. That has new teachings and new practices and really has a path emerge that makes integral awakening much easier. So enough of me babbling. Please don't believe anything I said, but take it to heart and try for yourself. Take responsibility and test it and see if it works and see what doesn't work. And keep persisting until you find something that works for you. And don't rule out finding a teacher that can assist you. But be very careful. There's a lot of kooks out there. So that was a lot. I hope it was helpful.